Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Thank you so much for joining us. It's Friday on the show. We'll come to Jeff Duncan here in just a second. But listen, we've had a great week on the show. So if you miss shows, if you're listening on the radio or listening at SuperTalk.fm, you can get the show there. You can go to Facebook or YouTube or your favorite podcast. But it's been a great week, and I appreciate our guests joining us, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. So let's shift gears now and move over to my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. He is the man when it comes to the Saints. Really, he's the man when it comes to sports. Jeff, how you doing, my friend?
Ricky, I'm doing good. Good to be here. I wish it was under better circumstances with the Saints, but we got a lot to get into.
We do, and we're gonna cover those. I want to start with this. You and I chatted a little bit about this before the show started, and Derek Carr is coming back this week from his oblique injury, and there's been several people who have posted about one. Obviously friends like Catherine Terrell, who we used to work with, and many others. But he said this of coming back. That he said, I'm going to quote him directly: "I am no savior. There's only one of those, and that is not me. I am here to be a great leader and to be a great teammate and do my job to the best of my ability." I thought that was kind of the perfect thing to say in the moment. What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I thought it was very poignant. I was there yesterday when he said that, and I think sometimes it does help to have that perspective given to you in sports. I mean, we all get caught up in professional sports, especially the New Orleans Saints down here in the Gulf Coast region. And it's, sometimes important to hear the athletes put things into perspective of what we're talking about here. I've always said I love the fact that every column I write usually ends up on the front page of the paper. It's always read very heavily. That's important to me because it means football is important. Saints are important to people down here in our region. But I'm also very aware that football is just a game, it's just a sport, and sometimes it takes something like that to kind of give us a little perspective to step back and say, with all this vitriol we have today and social media, and you just see some of the invective that's used from passionate fans, sometimes it's important to hear some words like that from Derek Carr.
Well, Jeff, you wrote the book on Sean Payton and Drew Brees, and you talked about needing to have a PhD to run that offense, and both Brees and Payton were masters at it, but it really put a lot of responsibility on the quarterback to read the defense and to make the proper calls at the line, et cetera. We talked a lot about this new offense that's being run by Clint Kubiak, and while there's been some simplification of it, a simplification of the scheme relative to where they were with Sean Payton, you still have a lot. I mean, there's still a lot of work the quarterback's got to do. He's got to find the open receivers. There's a lot of work that still has to be done. We can talk about this dumbing down of it, or maybe the simplification of it to a fault. You still got to have a quarterback that can run it. And Derek Carr came into this season really working hard, trying to make this one of his best seasons ever. Started out great, didn't go so well after that. Of course, he gets hurt. And then we see two quarterbacks come in, and our two backups, and they struggled. It will be interesting to see with Carr coming back, can he begin to set the offense back on track again? Just because it's been simplified doesn't mean that a rookie can come in and just run it. It doesn't work that way, does it?
No, and I think in some ways maybe this will help some people gain a little more appreciation for Derek Carr. I mean, he was playing very well before his injury. He's ranked among the leaders in the entire NFL in efficiency and production. But for whatever reason, maybe it's just the scarlet letter of having to follow Drew Brees. But there's some segments of the fan base that have never really warmed to him. And I think maybe the Spencer Rattler run at quarterback maybe made people appreciate a little more Derek Carr and what he does. And I'm writing about Spencer Rattler this week because he had a three game run, and you and I talked about it, Ricky. There were so many people, unfortunately, unfairly and unrealistically placing expectations on Spencer Rattler as a 5th round rookie quarterback. I've never seen anything like that. That was out of control. And it just speaks to, I think, to how desperate some fans are for hope and for light at the end of the tunnel with this team. And I think they learned a lesson there in just where things are at with this offense, and that they desperately need Derek Carr back under center.
I definitely agree they do. And he's coming back with, clearly when Taysom Hill left the game and wasn't able to play, it changed things. And you can't lose Chris Olave and some of the other stars. You can't lose the interior of your offensive line. And that combined with the defense, which, as much as we don't want to talk about this, they did play somewhat better last week, and we can chat about that a little bit. Still letting some big plays get by and so on. But it's been the perfect storm. And I'm not a wallflower, man. I see what I'm looking at. But my thought is that as long as the coaches don't lose the locker room, with Derek Carr coming back, I'm not saying they have a chance. I'm just saying they're going to play better. I really believe that you'll see this team play better. What do you think?
Oh, I definitely think they're still in this thing. Now, I think it's a critical stretch here. They have really very little margin for error, and that's what gives me pause. But you've got the worst team in the league basically this weekend. So that's a good get-right opponent. The worst defense probably in the league, the one that you already lit up just a few weeks ago in the Superdome. So it's a perfect opponent to kind of get Derek Carr's feet wet again, run the ball, get the running game going again. That was the strength of the offense, and kind of get some good mojo and a little confidence back. This team's lacking some confidence right now, and a win can cure that. And then you come back home with what will be the most critical game of the year. You're playing the division-leading Falcons, your arch rivals, in the Superdome. And that, plain and simple, is a must-win game. You lose that game, it's over. I mean, you'd be 4 games behind with roughly 8 games to play. It'd be over. But the opportunity's there. If you win, all of a sudden you're within probably a game or two of the lead, and you've won 2 in a row, and you have some confidence and you got some momentum. So this thing's definitely not over, largely because the division is so mediocre that you're still in it. So I think that's important to know too, is that yes, you're still in it, but there's still bigger problems here in the organization. If you were in a division where there was a really elite team, you'd pretty much be out of it.
But, it's interesting. I don't know if anyone could have called the number of injuries that we're having with the Saints, or that we could, after the first 2 games, make such a bad downturn and all of that. I don't know if anyone could ever played it out this way. But you said going into the season that in spite of the fact that the record may not be what we think it's going to be, in spite of the fact that Tampa may look like they're on a winning surge, or maybe with Cousins, Atlanta's going to be different. And this, no matter how you shake a stick at it, it's going to be close. And it's very possible that is actually going to be the way it plays out.
Yeah, I think the division lacks a dominant team. I mean, we've seen that, and Atlanta, I think, has the most potential. They're fairly healthy, and they're starting to kind of get it together on offense, which was the problem early on. Kirk Cousins settling in, so I think they have to be the definite front runners. I mean, the Saints have so many issues that right now they just have to take care of their own house and not worry about anybody else. I mean, they're 2-6, Ricky. They've lost 6 games in a row. So I mean, you saw the numbers I put up. I mean, it's the first time since Mike Ditka was here that they've done some of this stuff. So this is uncharted territory for the team, and they've got so many issues. I think what I'm writing about for the weekend that I get asked a lot about what's wrong with the team, and I really think. And you're hearing it right now from the players. You're hearing it from Alvin Kamara. You're hearing from Pete Werner, some of the veteran players. They've got issues with details and things that I've seen be a problem for this team for years now. It's not. This was something I wrote about after last season. The details in their game have to be improved, and that was a strength of Sean Payton. And to me, that's the biggest issue in the organization. Is they've lost that attention to detail. And so it shows up on game days. You see it in a holding call at the wrong time that makes it 2nd and 20. You see it in a drop pass here because the receiver cuts the route off just a little too soon and the ball goes behind the receiver and everybody goes, oh my gosh, that was almost a catch. Well, it's the detail in the route and the timing of the pass. And so it looks close, but replicated over the course of a 70, 80 play game, those little mistakes add up to a 6-game losing streak. And yes, you can focus on it and try and get it fixed, but can you sustain that focus? I don't know. I haven't seen them sustain it. This very much reminds me of the pre-Peyton Breeze days where the team can tempt you and tease you with their talent. You can talk yourself into, yeah, they just beat the defending Super Bowl champion St. Louis Rams. This team's good. And then the next week they'll lose to the Detroit Lions. That's what I see right now going on. And I don't know if it's going to get fixed long term. Maybe it will. I know they've kind of had to rally the troops, circle the wagons this week. And I think they will play a lot better. And maybe with a few wins, they catch fire and get some momentum. We'll see.
So let me check with my buddy Kyle here. I noticed we had a little blip there. Kyle, we're still rolling good there.
No, go to break.
Okay. We're going to break. We're Jeff Duncan. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We had a little technical glitch toward the end of that first segment, so if it ended abruptly, it was just a little blip, and we got through it. And here we are back with Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com of the Times-Picayune. Just one of the leading sports guys in Louisiana, in the sports South for that matter. He's on the NFL Hall of Fame selection committee, and he's been covering the Saints a long time. He's written several books. He is the man when it comes to the Saints, and he has a lot of history to draw from. I would call you a Saints historian. But listen, Jeff, I want to ponder on this point just a bit. You talked about it, and you talked about it last year. I remember so well how you talked about it. And then you just mentioned it, this notion about attention to detail, that with a lot of parity in the NFL these days, the reality is that you have to mind the details and pray for those one or two big plays that could make the difference in the ball game, because a lot of games are going to be close. And if you're not minding the details, it can really change the course of a game. And you may never get a chance to let a big play or two be the thing that sets you over. When you watch the tape, and you did this last year, and you did it the year before as well, when you watch the tape, you haven't been convinced yet that the Saints are really preparing themselves throughout the game for the big plays they might have. And as you pointed out, the first two games might have just been a big tease. But how, is that coaching at the end of the day? Does it come back to Dennis Allen?
Well, I guess at the end of the day it would, because he has to hold the players accountable for their execution. So, really it starts with the players, and you're hearing it from some of the veteran guys right now. You read between the lines, they're saying guys need to look in the mirror. They need to, hold themselves accountable. That was a lot of the same comments we heard last year. And I think even Dennis Allen said in the press conference, I asked him about it Wednesday, he said, we got some young players on this team that are learning the hard way how difficult it is to become a pro. And so you can read into that what you want, but what it's basically saying is, are guys studying? Are they going home? Are they becoming professionals and really taking seriously their job of being prepared for the game on Sunday? The coaches and other players can't go home with everybody and make sure that everybody's doing their homework, if you will. It shows up on game days when you don't. And so that ultimately does come down to the coach. I even asked Dennis, and I said, you have to start considering personnel changes if that's happening. He said, everything's on the table. Well, that ultimately comes down to, are you going to change out personnel? That stuff is difficult to do. And it reminds me a lot. I know I get charged all the time with bringing up Sean Payton, but he's the best coach that I've ever covered. And he's the best coach in this franchise's history. And he's the guy that we all were going to compare everything to. And Sean Payton did not let things slide. One of his great strengths, if you talk to players and coaches that worked with him, coached under him, he believed in confrontation. He believed in, hey, that defensive tackle's not quite giving enough effort at practice. I'm calling him up in my office and I'm getting in his butt. You know what I mean? And that's difficult to do. A lot of coaches won't do it. It's just, it's hard to believe, but they won't. It takes guts. Dan Campbell told me all of this about Sean Payton. Dan Campbell is obviously one of the most successful coaches in the league now. I think that element is missing. I think that's what's missing is that fear of reprisal. And I don't know if it gets fixed. I don't know. I mean, I just think that ultimately is what's going on. That's why when I tell people, it's not just Pete Carmichael. It's not just the offense. It's bigger than that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it.
It's a overall organizational systemic issue I see. So it swallows up Derek Carr. It swallows up. They've got good players on this team. Now, I don't know if they're a Super Bowl contending roster. I don't think they're close to that. But they are better than 2-6, and with the injuries. And yeah, they've had injuries, but every team has injuries. I mean, I think that's an excuse. I think it's something that also Sean Payton would never do. He would never use that as a crutch. He wouldn't allow his team to have that as a crutch. I mean, last week, basically, they had the entire offense back except Eric McCoy and Derek Carr, and they scored 2 field goals. I see the Green Bay Packers. They lose their starting quarterback, Jordan Love. They bring in Malik Willis. He gets in the building on Tuesday, and they win a game with him on Sunday. It happens around the league. You have good organizations overcome that. And so what I'm starting to see is a lot of references to the injuries. To me, that's playing the victim card. It should not happen.
Listen, words matter. We all know that. And so when you're a head coach in this moment, as Dennis Allen is, everything he's saying is being, split and analyzed and all of that. From this availability you're talking about, this big news conference where he spoke and you asked a question, some of the headlines that came out of that, I want to ask you if you think this was fair, that he literally said there are no great young players on this team. That was some of the headlines that came out of it. Is that just a mincing with words?
Yeah, I think that's getting overplayed a little bit. First of all, one thing I like about Dennis Allen is he is brutally honest, usually. He doesn't, for the most part, he tells you the truth, how he feels. And I like that about him. And I think he was being honest there. Now, what I would maybe take a little, I don't know, I would ask him, is it really just the players that aren't great? Or are you not developing them in the building? Whose fault is that you don't have any great young players? And I tend to agree with him. The only players I think you could say of the last few drafts that would be considered great potentially would be Chris Olave, and I'm not sure he's great. That's a big word. But whose fault is that? Is that the draft process? Did they not identify great players? Is it the coaches not developing the great players? It's a bigger problem. If you've had 4 or 5 drafts and you haven't produced, and this is the truth, Ricky, the only Pro Bowler they produced in the last 5 or 6 drafts is Eric McCoy and Rashid Shaheed, who wasn't a draft pick. He was an undrafted guy, and he's just a return specialist. Is how he made the Pro Bowl. He didn't make it as a receiver. So that's an issue, and that's part of the problem. The roster is not quite as good as they think, and some of these free agents they brought in have not produced. Chase Young's a great example. They kind of hung their hat on him, and he kind of is exactly what he's been with the other organizations he was with.
Incredible. And then, of course, Shaheed and McCoy both are out, ironically. So it's been a really tough season. You talk about the players need to look in the mirror, and I've heard the public comments of some of the leaders on the team. Last year, we watched the coaching staff lose the locker room toward the end. And they talked about cultural changes and all this other stuff they had to do. How do you compare what's happening in the locker room now with what we saw toward the end of last season?
I think it's similar. I think I like what I heard from the players this week. I mean, they're definitely circling the wagons. So I definitely like what I'm hearing. I think the veteran players on the team know that they've got to kind of wake up some of the younger guys. So I think this is a crossroads moment for this team this season. And like I said, there's a chance. I mean, they're not playing the Baltimore Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs and the Detroit Lions. I mean, they've got an opportunity here. They play a very weak schedule coming up. So there's a chance if they can put it together. I'm cynical because I haven't seen them do that over an extended period of time. So I've seen them put it together for a couple of games and then they get complacent again. And you talked about that. Mickey Loomis said after last season, I remember that press conference vividly. He said, we've got to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. We've become a little too complacent. Well, I haven't seen that being enforced. I think everyone's still a little comfortable, and I think you see what happens when that happens. I understand they've had injuries. I get it. That's a factor, but they've lost 3 games in a row. They're not even competitive. They've lost by 18 or more points in 3 straight games. So if you were losing by 3 points or 4 and you were competitive to the very end, like you were against the Eagles and the Falcons, I think I would be a little more convinced that they could put things together. But they're getting trounced, Ricky. Trounced. I mean, first time since the Ditka years they've lost 3 games by 18 or more points.
Woo, buddy, it's hard to watch. It really is. And do you still have the concern that the leaders on the team are mostly the older guys and no young guys are emerging as leaders? Yeah,
I think that's an issue because your best players are the guys that are kind of at the end of their careers. Not your best players, your team captains. Yeah. They've been given that status because they earned it, but they're no longer the best players on the team. They're the anointed captains, and the guys that are the best players aren't really leader types. Chris Olave is a really good player, but he's not really a leader. It's just not his makeup. I think Eric McCoy is, and he's hurt. So I do think there's a little bit of that going on. I think what you see is there are certain guys on this team that are pros that know how to do it, and they're kind of in their own world, their own silo. They're taking care of business, and they come to work. They know what they're doing, but I'm not sure that they're bringing everybody with them. And that's just a classic leadership example of are they Pied Pipers or are they just kind of great players on their own? And look, all it takes in this world, Ricky, I don't want to make it sound like this is a flaw, this is a terrible situation. I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot. It's these small little things in this league that make the difference between 6-10 and 10-6.
Well, we will see this weekend. Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com of the Times-Picayune. We'll pray Kyle Curley, the producer of this show, play some wonderful music at the Superdome that gets everybody riled up and gets us through this next step. Let's hope that. Listen, have a good day, my friend.
All right. We'll talk next week, buddy.
We'll have JT Mitchell from SuperTalk Mississippi News after this.